Okay, I'm going to talk about, obviously, certain or very, very significant events that happened this week. And what appears to be actually the most significant event of all, I had mentioned that that before the Mashiach comes, there has to be what's called rehabilitation. Because the Rosh Hashanah is not going to bring the Jewish people to an individual like the Mashiach that is so unbelievably lofty and holy and so on, So therefore there will be what's called a rehabilitation process. We see that where it says that the Rosh Hashanah is going to gather the Jews, no matter where they are, the ends of heaven. He's going to gather them from the ends of the ends of heaven. He's going to gather them and bring them to himself. And that really, in many ways, is the promise of God, And of course, it's we don't really understand in many ways how that's going to be, because the Jews basically 11 million Jews are gone, assimilated, intermarried, unaffiliated. I mean, it's a terrible destruction of what's happened to the Jewish people, In any case, there will be this rehabilitation. Now, I also mentioned a couple of weeks ago that in order for a rehabilitation really to take place, you really need three situations. One situation is the concept of security. That Israel has to be secure. Right now they're threatened on all sides by their enemies. So the question, of course, is people don't want to move there because you never know what. The war could break out from Iran, from the Arabs, from, there's so many different places, from the Houthis, whatever, that it could break out, Hezbollah and Hamas and so on, in Syria, whatever. So clearly Israel has to be secure. That's a first requirement. A second requirement I had mentioned is prosperity, that the Jewish people in Eretz Israel have to be prosperous. You have to be able to move there and make a living and have some type of economic security. It has to be what's called a user-friendly state where people feel okay to move there and not have to worry about, how am I going to survive here? Certainly economically and besides security and so on, And the third thing I mentioned is religiosity. That Israel has to become a religious place. What does that mean? Not that you coerce or compel people to observe halacha. No, that's not what you do. But I had mentioned a while back, a couple of weeks, that the way to do it is to bring Torah back to the Jews. And we know, as I said then, that when a person learns Torah and becomes familiar with it, then the enormous spiritual force in Torah itself will have an effect on your neshama, your soul, and you come back. That's the way to do it. You don't coerce people, compel people, and so on. Of course not. But anyway, these are the three things that basically have to, in that sense, have to happen in order for a rehabilitation process to begin. Now, this week, amazingly so, or the week that just passed actually, whatever, we have major steps in that direction. And I'd like to talk about each one and analyze them and show in many ways how they demonstrate that it's actually happening, that redemption is really happening. Rehabilitation is really happening. And that's the amazing thing about that. So let's take a look at the first thing. Now, I've said many times over the years, the concept of who is Trump. And I had said that Trump really is Esav, and Esav or Edom, right? That in the end of time, since Esav or Edom want to repent or do tshuva, therefore God says that in the end of time, you will again come back to do tshuva, and you will assist Yaakov. You will assist your brother, as it says, Rav Ya'avoid Tzoir, the older will serve the younger. Now that's what should have been. However, Esav, of course, became a Russia, And I've said this, many shurim before and so on. And the Medrash reads Rav Ya'avoid Tzoir, the older shall serve the younger, as Rav Ya'aved Tzoir, because in the Torah there's no punctuation, which means that the older will persecute to oppress the younger. And that is, of course, when Yaakov needs an atonement for the sins, then Esav or Edom becomes the main, of course, agent for that persecution, and therefore the main agent to bring an atonement or a kapora to Yaakov. However, that will ultimately change in the end, where the whole job of Esav basically is to assist Yaakov. And what we see in the Torah, which is something very important, is when Esav does finally meet Yaakov, he says a very interesting statement. He says, Yehi lecha shalach, let that which is yours be yours. Now we know that Esav was coming with 400 guys or men to kill Yaakov. And of course Yaakov was tremendously afraid. That's what we know. But in the end, Esav says to Yaakov, Yehi lecha shalach, let that which is yours be yours. What does that mean? So Rashi says that from here, we learn from that that Esav said to Yaakov that everything that you took from me is yours. It's okay. I'm okay with that. And of course he was coming because he was enraged that Yaakov stole his brachas. And now he says, it's yours, you can keep it, and so on. That's tshuva, because he recognized that the blessings that Yitzchak gave legitimately now belongs to Yaakov, because he's the one that, of course, is in line with the brachas, the blessings, because he is righteous. And Esav realized that. Now, for a person like Esav, a Rasha, an evil person, to acknowledge that is tshuva, because he acknowledges that these blessings belong to who? To somebody who is holy and righteous. So that's a very important idea. So therefore, Esav in the end of time is Yehi lecha shalach, that which is yours be yours. Esav, of course, becomes a toiv shebe Esav, the good part of Esav, right? And of course, as a result of that, in the end, of course, he does tshuva. And I have said many, many times that Donald Trump is a reincarnation of Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, who, together with Rabbi HaKadosh, was the perfect relationship of Rav Ya'avoid Tzoir, as Rashi brings down and so on. In any case, now I have also said something very important, that what is the job then of Tov Shebei Esav? What is his job? And I mentioned that there are basically 4 jobs that Esav has. Now, we know Esav, of course, became Edom. The Edom, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, and many times, that Edom is Christianity, and Christianity is, of course, Western civilization, Rome, Western civilization, and therefore, Trump, who's the head, really, of Western civilization, is Esav. But it's Esav that's doing tshuva. That's a very important concept. And he has 4 jobs. First job is to do what? Is to assist the Jews, because that's what repentance means, in doing what? To assist them in them doing the tikkun, especially to assist them that they have to get back the land of Israel. All of it. And that's his first job. The second job I had mentioned, right, is to protect Israel from its enemies. Third job is to make America great. Why? Because the key idea is that America, when it becomes great, now has unbelievable status and credibility to the world. And if they feel very close to the Jews in Israel and so on and so forth, then of course the whole world will want to be close to America. And as a result of that, they will want to become close to Israel. And that's, of course, exactly what's happening. And the fourth idea I mentioned is that his job also is to take America and change it into a much greater moral society, which he's doing by the Supreme Court, because it is the judges that really determine the morality of the country, and also all the 140 judges, federal judges, that he's appointed. In any case, that's his job. Now, Has he done these jobs? Well, let's take a look. We know. One, the first thing he did, which is unheard of, is he declared Jerusalem as the capital of Israel for the first time. This is the official policy of the United States, to declare, in other words, that's Esau saying to Jacob, Yaakov, Jerusalem is yours. You see, I'm not going to contest it. The second thing, of course, is that he moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The third thing is that if Jerusalem is the capital, then guess what? Then the country, Israel, belongs to the Jews. Because obviously you can't have a capital if you don't have the country. So that's the third thing that he did. Then the fourth thing he did, and this took everybody by surprise, is he declared the Golan to be Israel. You see? And now this week he did something again, which is out of nowhere. He said that Yehud and Shomron, which the territories, right, that there's nothing illegal about it. That's which means, of course, that it's legal. According to international law, right, it is legal. Yehud and Shomron is legally the Jews. You see, and that's a very, very important concept. Why? Think about that. What has been the major Arab complaint or their claim? That the Jews are in occupied territory, right? That's what they say. You know, that the territory of Yehud and Shomron does not belong to the Jews, you see. I mean, they say the whole state doesn't belong to the Jews, but certainly these territories, right? And therefore the Jews have no right to these territories, right? And therefore you need a two-state solution, or you got to give it back to us. But all of a sudden, when Trump comes out and makes the official United States policy, that what? That the territories, Yehud and Shomron, is legally Jews, voila, as they say, then there's no more, no more dispute. You know, it's not occupied. You see, you can't occupy that which is yours. I mean, you could, but it's a legal occupation, you see. So what Trump really said is that you're not occupiers. So what he did, he just threw out a major claim of the Arabs. Just threw it right out. And they always say that, you know, it's illegal, it's occupied territory. You know, the United States now has an official policy that the Yehud and Shomron legally belongs, according to international law, to the Jewish people. So he just threw out the entire claim of the Arabs. Now it's astounding. So take a look what he's doing. Now, if he did that, that's the end of this two-state solution, isn't it? You see, what's the two-state solution? It's one thing if you claim that it's occupied territory. So you could say, okay, so we want it back. But if it's not occupied territory, if it's legally the Jewish people's, why should we want to give back our territory? There's no business giving you back territory. There's no two states anymore. You see? So he just threw out what everybody's screaming, Europe and so many other countries, well, it's got to be a two-state solution. What are you talking about? It's theirs. They don't have to give back anything, you know. So what he just did, he dismissed the entire idea of two states, which is amazing. You see? You know, I mean, maybe they can claim, please give us something anyway, you know, even if it's yours, but they can no longer claim it's ours and therefore you're occupying it. This is what's called revolutionary. It's astonishing that, and this is the import or the consequences of what the United States just did, and Trump did it. You see, even though what's amazing is that, well, why would he do that? Because he just put in a major obstacle in having the Arabs make peace with Israel. You know, with his peace plan. Why would he do that? You know, it doesn't make sense. And the answer is because that's his job. His job is really to give back Israel back to the Jews. You see, that's the classic of Yehi Lecha Shalach. Let that which is yours be yours. And that's what Trump is doing. It's absolutely amazing. He just did it this week.
Is this rectify what the Rub said was Donald Trump's first or second, I forget which one, mistake regarding the peace plan?
No. That's a long time
Sorry.
ago. Wow. No. That's a couple of years ago. No. Anyway. So therefore, this is clearly the repercussions of what Trump did. I mean, when you think about it, what Trump is basically doing, right, is he's giving back Israel back to the Jews. And America, if America says we recognize it, guess what? You could take that to the bank. It's recognized. Who's going to stand up to America? And which is amazing. He's like the greatest friend Israel has ever had. And who is it? It's Esav, his brother. You know what I'm saying? And that's really who he is. He's the Toiv Sheba Esav. You see. And besides that, he's also done other things. He taken away the funding from UNRWA of the UN. He's put the embassy, the consulate that represented the Arabs, he mixed it, he put it together with the US consulate and so on. He took away money from Arabs and so on. It's astounding what the man is doing, you see. And that's really his job. And he's doing it. So this week that he's done that is a major move toward the redemption. Because I think basically, what else is there to give back to the Jews? They have Israel, they have the Golan, they have Jerusalem, they have the embassy there, which is a recognition politically and so on, right? And now they have Yud and Shomron, which really now means that they can now build settlements, without any problem, because if it's of course I can build a settlement, it's my territory, my land. So they can actually build settlements, and I think Pompeo also said that the settlements are not an obstacle to peace. I think he also said that.
He said that.
What was that?
He did say that.
Yeah, that's not. Think about that. Carter, all these guys, Bush and Clinton. It's an obstacle to peace. He just came out and said no way. So therefore, they can now build. They can annex the whole, and of course they will do that. They can annex Yehud and Shomron, and that's the end of the obstacles to build settlements. Unbelievable. What the repercussions of that statement is absolutely unbelievable. That moves the Geula, the redemption, forward. You see, and in many ways. So what happens now is that the land is now being returned to the Jews, you see. And it's funny because Europe just came out with a law, and they said that, if anything comes from, Yehud and Shomron, it's got to be labeled that it's coming from occupied territory, you see, which is the exact opposite of what Trump just did. So in many ways, it's the second thing that Trump has to do, is to protect the Jews from the enemies of the Jews, which is the UN, which we know that Nikki Haley did an incredible job, Europe, and so many countries that are against the Jews. It's astounding to watch a president deviate from the history of the United States. No other president can even touch what Trump did. And of course, ultimately speaking, whoever's the next prime minister is going to annex Yehud and Shomron. And therefore, that opens up the whole Yehud and Shomron to a massive building campaign. So if anybody wants to buy an apartment, you can now think about it somewhere in Yehud and Shomron. What was that?
More affordable.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. There's an enormous...
There'll be opportunities, big settlements.
Oh yeah.
Maybe even cities that are affordable.
Yeah, sure. So this is a tremendous move toward the redemption, Israel now has legal right to all of their country. See, anyway. The second thing which is very interesting, which is also going on, and the question is, of course, is the security. So the question is Iran, which is a very big question, of course. Iran, of course, they hate Israel. They keep talking about destroying Israel and so on. So the real question is, well, how do you get rid of this enemy? Because they are threatening Israel existentially. That's what they're doing. They're threatening Israel existentially. So then the question is, what will be the end result? How do you get rid of these guys? Is there going to be a war between Israel and Iran, or between the U.S. and Iran? There's no question about it that they're certainly advancing uranium, purifying uranium, centrifuges and so on. There's no question about that. But if Israel goes to war with Iran, it's very serious, because Iran, based on the precision destruction of the Saudi Arabia oil wells, God forbid, who knows how many Jews could die. They have now missiles with drones and missiles that can reach Eretz Israel, you see. So that could be a catastrophic war, even if Israel wins, right? Where they take out, however they want to do it to Iran and so on, But Iran has many missiles aimed at Israel. So, chas v'shalom, God forbid, that could be catastrophic to Israel. Because how big is Israel anyway? It's only got really 4 major cities, you see, But what I think will happen is this, God is not going to do that. He's going to say to Israel, listen, you don't have to worry. I'm taking out the Arab countries by themselves. They are being destroyed internally. You don't have to fire a bullet. You don't have to waste your money. You see, there's no Jewish lives lost. Internally, they are being destroyed. You think about that. There's what? There's Libya. Egypt is in turmoil, right? Yemen is in threat, or Yemen is dying. It's unbelievable what's going on in that country, Now we have riots in Lebanon. It's almost like payback because you've allowed Hezbollah to operate from your country. Then you have Iraq has major riots. Syria, of course, is a basket case. You have riots in Afghanistan, with the Taliban threatening to take it over. If you think about it, the whole Arab world is collapsing. We thought in 2011 there would be an Arab Spring. It's not an Arab Spring. It's an Arab disaster. One state after the other is either a failed state or it's collapsing because of riots. So in many ways, that's a chesed, you see. You have to remember, it says in the Navi, in the prophets, Berega kotten azavtich. For 1 second I will abandon you. This is what God says. Uberachmim gedolim. But in tremendous compassion, akapseich, I will gather you. What does that mean? That means that, in the end of time, the redemption will happen with incredible mercy. And we're watching that the Arab world is collapsing. The enemies of Israel that certainly were enemies, they're all collapsing by themselves internally. You see, it's unbelievable. It's like the Soviet Union, they were tremendously enemies to America and the whole West, and they just collapsed. They shut down the government, by themselves. Nobody had to go to war. There was no war. That war could have been an atomic war and so on, God just said, it's over with. That's it. I'm closing the door. I'm shutting the lights. And that's it. So therefore the Soviet Union is no more, of course, it's Russia. And Russia basically is not communist. It's dictatorship, Putin and so on, but it's not communist. They don't believe in that anymore. It's over with. That whole economic philosophy is gone and so on, So God, when He wants, can destroy a country internally. Doesn't have to have a war, you see. And apparently He's done that with the Arab nations and Israel. He said, listen, I'm going to do this with incredible mercy. You don't have to do anything. No fights, no wars, no nothing, right? I'll take them out. You watch. That's all. And each of these countries collapse, And now Lebanon, as I mentioned, Lebanon, you have Libya, you have Iraq. They all have riots going on. And lo and behold, Iran is having riots all over the place. The question is, are we watching the end of Iran? In other words, Iran can be taken out not with Israel fighting Iran, but Iran can be taken out just like all the other Arab countries or Muslim countries, you see. And they wanted to raise the oil, the price of gasoline or whatever. And there's a tremendous amount of riots all over Iran. There are hundreds and hundreds of people being killed, which shows you the severity, the seriousness of what is going on. And of course, when people die, then people become enraged and incensed. So that even fuels the rebellion even greater, you see. But it's happening. So the question is, it's happening this week, same thing. See, so are we witnessing the beginning of the end of Iran internally without Israel having to go to war? You see, that would be absolutely incredible if that happened. And I'll tell you something interesting. What's happening now is also unusual, that there are many nations that are having tremendous amount of rebellions all over the world. It's interesting, you know. For instance, besides Lebanon and Iraq, you have Hong Kong. There's a major rebellion going on in Hong Kong against China. Again, because of corruption, because they're sick and tired of the dictatorships and so on. So they are fighting China, you see. Then you have Chile, which is interesting. Chile also, there's major riots, they're burning banks, they're burning stores and so on, to such an extent where many of the Jews are thinking of leaving Chile. You see? So Chile is also having a tremendous amount of unrest. Then we have unrest in Bolivia, which really used to be anti-Semitic, you know, and so on. Venezuela is basically a basket case. That's over, you know, and so on, you know. And you have, like I say, you know, in many different countries, Venezuela, I mentioned, you know, you have Libya, you have Syria, you have Yemen, which is almost finished. Yemen is almost finished and so on. You have a lot of different rebellions against the government because people are beginning to see how much corruption there is in terms of countries. It's almost like some type of a spirit is sweeping mankind. You know, it's like a spirit that God gives to the world when He wants to change it, that He enables people to see the truth, and He gives them the courage to overthrow the dictators that are tremendously evil.
Does Rob include the populist movements that are...
What was that?
Does Rob include in this the populist movements that say they're happening in Europe and Britain, the Brexit, the desire to leave?
Well, it's not a rebellion, but there's a big chaos in Britain.
Violent.
It's not violent, yeah. But there's no question about that there's a major division, even in England. You know, there's no question about that and so on, you know. But there's no question that there's a tremendous amount of what's called unrest in the world. And it's against corruption and against dictatorships and so on.
Ukraine.
Well, Ukraine now is much more stable now that you have...
Yeah, but there's anti-corruption election, basically.
Well, yeah, okay, you know. But anyway, so we see that's happening also. So what's interesting is, will the Iranian rebellion accelerate and really begin to destroy Iran from internally? So therefore Israel will not have to go to war, and they will be, that'll hopefully nullify and remove Iran. It's something certainly to watch. Yeah.
You talked about Hong Kong,
Yeah.
the Orient. What
Yes.
parts do they have to play? I mean, we know Yaakov, we have Esau.
Well, I once mentioned, look, China is basically Yefes, you know. So in that sense, the part, whatever Yefes plays, they're just part of the world, you know, and so on, you know.
So the legend of the Avraham Avinu's children they sent away.
No, that's not China, that's India.
India.
Yeah, and so on, you know. Anyway, now we come to the third thing happening, you know, which is Israel. And what we're watching in Israel is historical. You should know. These things had never happened before, you know. It's interesting that, you know, there has been 2 elections, both of which failed. One was in April, that Netanyahu failed to put together a coalition. Another was in September. Again, he failed. And not only he failed, but Gantz also failed to put a coalition. It's like God is saying, and we know that these are Erev Rav, and God is saying to them, it's almost like He's saying to them, listen, you can have all the elections you want, but you're not going to have a government? Because the way you can look at it now is that the Erev Rav's ability to dominate the Jewish people is over. It's closing. But that has tremendous repercussions for the redemption, because that has to happen at the end. And like I say, twice they have failed to put together. Now, that's miraculous. And not only that, but it's clearly historical. This is what's happening. And as a result of that, Gideon saw, which I've said many times, my feeling is he will be the prime minister, and he will be able to put together a coalition. You see, you know. What is strange, however, I find, and I've thought about it, you know, is that even if God doesn't want, for instance, Netanyahu to be a prime minister, you know, why is the Ribono Shel Olam punishing him? Nothing happens without the will of God. We know that. You see. So we can ask the question that there's something wrong here. Even if you don't want the Erev Rav to continue, but why destroy Netanyahu? That's what's happening. It's clearly a decree. It's a divine decree, because nothing can happen without God's, of course, intervention and decision. But the question is, why do that? And so on. Because in many ways, Netanyahu has done a tremendous amount of good for the Jewish people. So let's take a look at what's happening to him. You have to understand that this apparently is an oynish, it's a punishment to Netanyahu. And the question which I'll try to answer is, why is this happening to him? You know, remember, there's two concepts here. One is to terminate the Erev Rav, to terminate those people that really are not interested in any way of promoting Judaism or promoting Torah. Okay, that's one. The second thing is to destroy a person. But what we see clearly is that God is not allowing any government that is in many ways opposed. And opposition doesn't necessarily mean against. It means that you're not interested in furthering it, and as far as you're concerned, you don't mind if other anti-religious movements are successful. It's the same idea, you see. So that we clearly see that this is what's happening. But when you think about that, that Netanyahu, now I have nothing personally against the man, obviously, you know. There are many great things that he did. He was really, exceptional in terms of his support and outright statement about the Jewish state, the security, and so on. So in that way, you know, those things that he did was in many ways outstanding, and so on, you know. In a certain sense, I feel sorry for him, because what he's about to go through, he hasn't even begun to experienced it, although he has to a certain extent. First of all, there is an enormous humiliation of being indicted. I mean, he's been indicted by Mendel, who's the Attorney General. That itself, and he's been indicted for 3 crimes, whatever they are. First of all, that itself is a humiliation. Terrible. You know, to be humiliated, to be embarrassed that way. The second thing is it's humiliation that he faces not only to himself and his family, but to Israel. He's now an indicted sitting prime minister, you know. So imagine he's got to walk into the Knesset and they all look at him, hey, you've been indicted criminally. Of course, which is terrible, you know. And not only in terms of that, you know, but in front of the world. He's a world leader in many ways. He is considered one of the greatest statesmen in the world. And now, when he goes anywhere in the world, he's going to be looked at, hey, you are criminally indicted, you know, by your own Attorney General. You know, we're not talking about another party. We're talking about your legal system has indicted you. So he's now going to be embarrassed or humiliated in front of the entire world. You have to understand what he's going to go through now, you know, which is terrible. And therefore, as a result of that, you know, okay, he's been prime minister for 10 years, very nice, you know, but his whole legacy is threatened. it's one thing to retire, you retire and you're out of it, and your legacy, all the good things you did are intact, but his legacy is threatened because this is going to follow him, wherever he goes, that you've been indicted criminally. These are terrible, it's a terrible situation that he is now going to have to face. Now, I'm not even talking about other things that he's going to have to face. You know what I'm saying? For instance, the money. Do you know what it costs to hire lawyers? I read that it's already cost him $1 million just to get to this point. And he's got 5 or 6 lawyers, I think he's hired and so on. And they couldn't even get him off the hook being indicted. How good are they? Are they be able to get him off totally and so on, So we're talking about the fact that it's going to cost him a fortune. That's a terrible punishment. The millions of dollars, and it doesn't make a difference if he has it or not. Just to spend that kind of money on legal fees is absolutely terrible. So every night he's going to go to sleep with this incredible anguish, agmas nefesh, agony, that he's got to face courts. Do you know how much time he's going to have to spend defending himself against 3 charges? So the real question, of course, is how in the world could he be prime minister if he's always thinking about, okay, what am I going to say in court? And he's got to meet with his lawyers and so on, He has no time to run a government. That's why in many ways the Likud has to wake up and say, hey, we can't let him represent us and so on, And then you never know, he could be convicted. Like Olmert. He could be convicted and sent to jail. That's a real possibility. And one thing would seem obvious is that if Mandelblit didn't think he had a case, he has to be an idiot to go and indict a sitting prime minister. Because if he is not convicted, then Mandelblit's career is over. If you think about that. Because, how do you go to indict a sitting prime minister? He must really think that he has a rock solid case. He and his whole staff of lawyers. So when you think about that, this is absolutely terrible. I feel sorry for the guy. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. So the question that you have to ask yourself for those who are into hashkafa and so on is what did he do that deserves such horrendous treatment? Why is God allowing this to happen? Because believe it or not, don't fool yourself. This is a gzera min hashamayim. This is a divine decree that what? First of all, what they did is they destroyed him politically because he was always considered invincible. Of course he's going to put a coalition. So he failed once in April, which is a terrible stain on his invincibility, so to speak. And then he failed again in September. So basically what the Rebbe Shem did is he made him a failed politician. You see. And then, okay, so he failed. How could he represent the Likud if he failed twice? Why would they go with this guy again? You see? There's no guarantee. And even if they had a third election, who says that he's going to do it again? The likelihood is that nothing changes. So anyway, the Likud has to drop him, which itself is humiliating if they do drop him. You see? So that's certainly a terrible thing that, if he is dropped. But then he's got to face a criminal charge. So not only has God destroyed him as a politician, right? He also has allowed a criminal indictment, which is now humiliation and all the things I've mentioned. Question is, how do we understand this, really? Because it's 2 different things. He could have just failed politically, and that's it. Then he realizes jig's up, as they say, and he goes and retires, and that's all. Instead, no. No, you're not getting away with just political failure. You are going to be indicted, and therefore you're going to suffer the anxiety, the anguish, humiliation, and so on, and the stain on your legacy. Why? That is the question. So I thought about that, because like I said, they're 2 different things. One could happen without the other, you see? And we know that this is a gzera. This is the judgment against them. Why would the Rebbe Shem do that? Now, a lot of this stuff you can think about, in terms of, why it happened and so on, But really when you begin to think about it, I thought about it, and I have reached certain conclusions. People can disagree with me, but you cannot disagree with the fact that this is a punishment. No way, because God controls the world, and therefore he hit him twice. The question is why? In two different ways: failed politician and criminal indictments. That's the question. I thought about it, and I feel that there are reasons for that. And I think in the end it boils down to something which I think a lot of people don't want to understand or admit. The problem is this: when you are in power, you are responsible to use that power in a way which is righteous. You see, you can't abuse the power and do nothing. Can't do that, you see. And if you abuse your power, if you neglect what you should be doing, then in a certain sense you are held accountable, you see. So the question is, well, what did he do that's wrong? Well, the first thing he did that was wrong, really, when you think about it, is when he joined Lapid. I think the year was 2013. You see, he allowed Lapid to become part of the coalition, and Lapid, gave terrible decrees, government laws against the Haredim, if you remember that, in terms of education, in terms of the draft, in terms of the economy. He took away money from the Haredim. There were many things that he did, Lapid, you see, that he could only have done because he was part of the government, you see. And therefore Netanyahu had no business joining with him, even if I think he had 21 seats, you see. Because how do you sit with a guy? First of all, your natural partners are the religious. So you are betraying your natural partners, the religious, by putting an incredible anti-Haredi person. How do you do that? You see? And that's what he did. Why he did that, you could ask yourself. But there's no question that was a terrible move against Haredim. Because if you think about it, look, they learn Torah, they're moiser nefesh, they sacrifice themselves, they observe the mitzvahs. How do you do that to people? Not only that, how many times did the Haredim join you in the coalition that enabled you to rule, to become prime minister? How do you do that to a person? Big mistake. You see, people think they can get away with it, which we'll see about Lieberman and so on, that you think that you can besmirch God, make a fool out of God, and go against him and violate, his commandments, besides violating the security, the friendship that the Haredim had with you for all the years. Doesn't work that way.
Why the delay in punishing him? Because of what happened?
We don't know why there's a delay. That we don't know, you see. But it's like it says, the millstone of God grinds exceedingly slow. Takes time till it gets to you, but exceedingly fine. And when it hits you, when the gzera is pronounced, then it's terrible what happens to a person, you see. And that's obviously what's happening to Netanyahu. So that's the first thing that I could see, which is a big mistake that he did, Became an enemy of God. That's really what it is, Second thing, if you begin to think about it, it's God. I can imagine God saying to him, wait a minute, I gave you the IDF. You have a strong army, you see. You have a strong army. And not only that, you have a president who backs you all the way. Now's the time. You see, Trump loves Israel. You see, so you got a guy who's going to back you completely. You see, and not only that, the Arabs are all running to do business with you. So it's not even them. They can't stand Abbas because hey, this guy's stopping us. He keeps refusing to make peace with Israel. So he's stopping us from doing what? From joining with Israel. So he's got all the incredible favorable conditions. Instead, what does he do? Right? Think about that. The South lives in fear. How much fear is going on in Sderot and so on? Do you know what? Imagine living in a city where any minute you got 15 seconds to get to a shelter and so on and so forth. Well, what's that supposed to mean? How do you allow that to happen? You see, not only that, do you know how much property the Gazans destroyed with their balloons? Unbelievable, millions of dollars. So the question is, excuse me, you're the prime minister, you've got Trump behind you, you've got an incredible army, you know what I'm saying? You got even the Arabs that want to join you. So then why are you allowing Arabs, Gaza, to destroy all this property? Why are you allowing them, right, to kill people? Why are you allowing them, right, to create an unbelievable amount of anguish and agony and fear among Israeli citizens? That's what you're supposed to do. And then to boot, which my feeling is really terrible, there are people who died. You know, people are dying and they have incredible grief and anguish that you could have prevented. You see, what are you doing? They're firing missiles at you and you're firing missiles at them. What are you doing? You playing ping-pong with them? You should go in and destroy them. How can a prime minister allow this? Fear, property damage, death. You know what I'm saying? And not only that, by doing this, you are displaying tremendous weakness to the world. And Arabs, of course, Iran, they take a look at this and say, well, they're not going to go to war, so we can do a lot of things. You are emboldening enemies of Israel to take action, Hezbollah and Hamas and so on, because they see you're a paper tiger. Yeah, but wait a minute, you're the what? You're the prime minister. You see? So this doesn't make any sense. And remember, if you are empowered to do something and you don't, then there's tremendous claims against you. You see, that's what happens. So in one sense, he's a tragic figure. He's done tremendously good for Israel. To face the UN, right? And to go to the Congress and talk behind Obama's back. Obama must have been going crazy, These are tremendous merits that he has. But at the same time, if you think about that, he has failed as a prime minister to do what? The greatest, the most important job of a prime minister is security, safety for its citizens. You see? How many years is Sderot being bombed? Years, decades, which is incredible when you think about that. And they all live in fear. The economy is shot down there, and so on. And people die. What's going on here? This whole thing doesn't make sense. And he could, of course they have this cheshbonis, the army. If we do something, then how are we going to support them? Well, what do you mean? They pressed the red button. It's over with. There's a thing called the red line. They went over the red line. Jews die. The life of one Jew is worth more than the whole position of Netanyahu as a prime minister. It's like Rabbi Aaron Kotler, Zechron Levracha, famous story, where the Jews were dying in the Holocaust, and he got a meeting with Irving Bunim, who was his liaison and so on, and they went to see Morgenthau, who was the Secretary of the Treasury. Morgenthau was Jewish. So Rabban wanted to convince him, whatever, to help them or give money, whatever, to save the Jews. So he went to see Morgenthau. Imagine the Secretary of the Treasury, I think it was 1942, 43, whatever, and he's sitting there, and he's explaining in Yiddish, and Bunim was translating, and he's saying this and that. So, Morgan was, well, Rabbi, what can I really do? The old story, right? Pushing it off, right? So Rabban Kotler, this is what a Godel does. He looked at Morgenthau and he said it in Yiddish, that the life of one Jew is worth more than your whole position. Tells that to the Secretary of the Treasury, So the story goes that Irving Bunim was shocked. You don't talk to the Secretary of the Treasury that way. The Leben von ein Yid wird mehr wie der ganze Stelle. It's worth more than your whole position. The life of one Jew, So Bunim looked at Rabban Kotler and he says, you serious? You want me to say this? So Rabban Kotler looked at Bunim and told him in Yiddish, Zogem, say it to him, fearless. And Bunam said to him, the rabbi says, you imagine, that the life of one Jew is worth more than your whole position as secretary. And Morgenthau, of course, was shocked, But he realized that the dedication and the devotion of Rabban Kotler was extraordinary. I'm saying? He saw that it was really serious. He didn't really want to insult Morgenthau, but he realized, So he said, okay, Rabbi, I'll see what I can do. Changed. And he tried to do things. And so on, People don't realize what the life of a Jew is. What do you mean the life of a Jew? What do you mean? I remember Rabbi used to say sacrifices for peace. Yeah, of course, and eventually God made him the sacrifice. We don't understand what a Jew is. We do not understand what the life of a Jew is, you see. So if somebody goes and kills Jews, these guys are killing Jews, Hamas, Hezbollah, you don't care, But the life of that one Jew that died and the family that grieves and so on, who knows in heaven what it shakes up in heaven, you see. Unfortunately, and he just allowed it. And the IDF, they have the power to go and stop this. They just sit and worry about, what are the Arabs going to say? What are you talking about? Jews are dying. They're frightened. They're in fear of property damage. Who knows what that did in heaven? You see. So when you put it, it is. We don't understand what the life of a Jew is. It's a tremendous mistake we make, People get carried away by their own positions, and so on, But they have no idea. They have blood on their hands. That's what it is. And God waits. For whatever reason, and we don't know why now, and so on, God said, it's over. You will be punished severely. Not only will you be made a failed politician, but I'm going to take you out with utter humiliation in front of the entire world, and so on, in front of the Israeli people, in front of the Knesset, you see. So you're finished. And eventually Likud has to drop him. They have to, because he's a failed politician. That's the real reason. Forget about the criminal indictments, He lost twice, so who's going to say he's going to win again? Put the coalition together, which he won't, you see. So could you imagine what the aggravation and the grief and the agony he's going through? But think about that. How many years went by, and the amount of agony and anguish that Jewish people went through, because he fundamentally did not do his job, what he should have done, and so on. Doesn't understand the life of a Jew, what it means. Anyway, so I believe that fundamentally, unfortunately for him, this is called payback. Because God, the justice of God is exact. Nobody suffers if they didn't sin. Nobody, no such thing, you see. And the fact that it's all happening, one failure, two failures, and now criminal investigations and so on, this isn't an accident. And it's funny, who's prosecuting him? The Sultan. The Sultan is prosecuting Netanyahu. It's incredible, And this is I believe this is the claims. It's absolutely tragic, but there's a reason for this and so on. In any case, especially when you think about the fact that, of course, he could have gone into Hamas. He should have destroyed Hamas. He's got Trump's backing. What's his problem? And because they're all afraid of the President of the United States. But on the contrary, and the IDF can take these guys out. It's always funny to watch the IDF. They know where everybody is, because that's how they always tell people, and so how do they figure out where the guys are, when they want to retaliate? Because they know where everybody is. They could take out Hamas probably in a week. It's over with. Yet they allow them to exist, you see? And therefore Jews suffer. We don't realize the punishment when you allow Jews to suffer and die. That we don't realize. The value of the life of a Jew. Any case, like I say, I feel sorry for the man, but listen, you want to accept the responsibility of being prime minister, be careful. You have to be careful. Because as Harry Truman used to say, the buck stops here. That's where it stops, you see. Anyway, so this is unfortunate, and so on. And you should know one thing, all of these things are historical and they're miraculous. We're not looking here at Teva. natural order. We're looking at Nisim. These are miracles. No coalition once. No coalition twice, right? And it's not just him. Gantz can't put a coalition. He can't coalition, you know?
Nobody from there.
Why? Because fundamentally, I believe that this is the end of the era of Rav. And the next government will be the beginning in many ways of the redemption, the rehabilitation. Somehow things will change, you see. And that's why there's an absolute failure. Now, I want to talk a little about Lieberman. Lieberman is something to, you know.
Sorry.
Can I say something to comment on?
On what?
First. On Netanyahu.
You want to say something? Yeah?
No, so I just want to ask your thought about it. I thought there was another reason why Netanyahu would also be punished was the fact for so many years he was the prime minister, he had the ability to bring back real education, Jewish education to the Jewish people. I think he even had the
well, that makes him
Ministry of Education.
Oh yeah, he was. He would use well, yeah.
And he had the Karadim with him.
Yeah. But
in fact, you know, he had every opportunity to improve and bring religious education to the Jewish people.
Yeah, what you're saying is absolutely true. You know, that's what makes him an heir of Rav.
Yeah, but that's the reason why he ought to be punished.
No, but then everybody should have been punished also. I don't believe that's why he's punished. I believe it is the fact that Jewish life, I believe that's the real critical ideas. What you're saying is true. I mean, he was the Misrad HaChinuch, right? What are you doing? You're allowing Jewish kids, millions of kids, 1.5 million kids in the secular public schools,
they know
right?
nothing about Torah, nothing.
Nothing, yeah. And not only that, he's allowing...
That's an annihilation of the Jewish people.
Yeah, so that's what makes him heir of Rav. Anyway, but I believe the real suffering that he's going to go through is not because of that. It's because of the enormous amount of Jewish suffering that he could have prevented. Anyway.
I would think of
He allowed Jews to be pulled out of their homes and the home was destroyed.
What was that?
Many homes were destroyed in the legal outposts, they call them.
Yes, I'm not even going into that. I don't even know all the things that he allowed under his watch. And he's a prime minister. I don't even know all the things that the police did, which in many ways was corrupt and illegal, what they did. And he's the prime minister. He could have stopped it. Well, he's the boss, right? And he did nothing. Like I said, there's so much stuff that he allowed, that I believe he allowed, that he should have put a stop to it, and so on. And he's not the only prime minister that did that, and so on. So I think when you add it all up, I think it's all part of the mix. Now, Lieberman is an interesting person.
Oh, wait, one other thing. But if we're going to say it's only the idea that they allowed the Jews to be killed and live under fear and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
all the other prime ministers did this also.
Yes, that's right.
So why weren't they punished the same way?
I want to tell you something. That's not a question you can ask of God. What you can ask, is why him?
Olmert was punished, I'm sure.
Yeah, Olmert was punished, but he got 18 months in prison. He did much worse than, because of him, Olmert is the one who came up with the idea of Gaza.
Sharon.
Yeah, and Sharon. Well, Sharon was...
You give 97% of...
We don't know why God does anything at any given time, why this and so on, But in a certain way, I believe, as bad as it sounds, that what God wants to do is a service to Netanyahu. Because either he gets it here, or he gets it in the next world. And I think that God said, listen, I'm going to give it to him here, and not in the next world, so he can get the next world. That is a cheshbon, as they say. That is a reason why God will do something. To give him the punishment in this world as opposed to the next world and so on. Anyway, now Lieberman is a very interesting person because the whole thing happened because of, if you think about Lieberman, which is incredible, but when you think about it, what is so interesting is this. It's a paradox. What's the paradox, Lieberman is an anti-Haredi. Okay. He has done now things to the Haredim, which is absolutely terrible. He has embarrassed them, he's badmouthed them, he's slandered them, you name it. And not only that, he's created a tremendous amount of division among the Jewish people. He's increased enormously the rage or the anger and the hatred that secular now have for religious Jews. I mean, what he did is really unforgivable, which is, however God will do that, I mean, I know why he did it, because he's losing his constituency, because there are basically no more Russians, they're all Israelis. So he's got to have a new cause. So the new cause, of course, is to attract the secular against the Haredim. Of course, that's not an excuse. That's what he did. But I find it interesting. Had he backed Netanyahu, right? Let's say in April, and he's the one who said, there was 60 seats that Netanyahu had. All he needed was one. That itself is a miracle, that he was just one away from a coalition, and he didn't have it, so he needed Lieberman. And Lieberman, of course, said no. Now, what Lieberman should have done, and that shows that he's an absolute fool, he should have said, okay, because in being part of the government, he could have got the Haredim to back off in some capacity, you see. Instead, he said no, because, I don't want the Haredim. He wouldn't even negotiate, basically. Now, what's interesting is, as a result of that, Netanyahu could not form a government, you see. And it happened the second time again. Netanyahu could not form a government, you see. So by doing that, he destroyed the Erev Rav's ability to survive. He killed the Erev Rav. So you'd think, wait a minute, you're the one that's part of the Erev Rav. On the contrary, you should have joined with Netanyahu, right? You would have perpetuated the Erev Rav, right? And then you could do what you do, whatever you want to do, basically, to the Haredim. Instead, he is the very tool that God used to destroy the Erev Rav. Because once he wouldn't join with Netanyahu, right? He lost, he can't put a coalition, first round. Second round, he can't put a coalition. Yeah, but wait a minute. You are destroying the Erev Rav, you see? And now, and therefore, what he did is he showed Netanyahu to be a failed politician. That's it. So it comes out that God used Lieberman to destroy the Erev Rav, when he himself had every reason to what? To preserve the Erev Rav, because he's part of the Erev Rav. I find that to be absolutely poetic, if you think about that, because that's what it says. Ish ba'a lo yeda, wild men don't know, uksil lo yovne zois, the fool does not understand. What that means is that God uses the very enemies of Judaism and so on, that they themselves are responsible for the destruction of the enemies of Judaism. They don't know. He uses them. So Lieberman is a tool while the Erev Rav collapsed. When it would have been in his interest, as I said, right, to join Netanyahu, to do what he can with the Haredim, and then Netanyahu would have been back in business. And if he would have been back in business as a new prime minister, then it's questionable if Mendel would have indicted him. Because when Netanyahu, closed the government for new elections in November of 2018, one of the reasons why he did that is so that he should be voted in again as prime minister, and therefore he will have a much greater position and stance to oppose Mandelblit. What a wrong reckoning, obviously, because that's what started the whole downfall of Netanyahu, you see. So therefore, had Lieberman supported him, then Mandelblit would have had a much more difficult time of indicting him, because that was his original reason for what? For collapsing the whole government. Is that if he's truly the prime minister, which he thought he would be in April, right, then Mandelblit is going to have a much more difficult time, because now he's chosen by the Israeli public to be the prime minister, you see? So he'll be a much stronger stance. See, they voted for me. It's amazing when you think about that. So what all Lieberman did was succeeded in weakening Netanyahu and destroying him. You see? And now what did he do? So he left the government open for somebody else to come in, right? Gideon Sa'ar, that's now going to work with the Haredim. See, because Gideon Sa'ar is a Shomer Shabbos. He's going to work it. So what did Lieberman accomplish? And I'll tell you something. I wouldn't be surprised. God will give success to Saar, and he's going to have a coalition. And it's very possible that he will have a coalition without Lieberman. Wouldn't that be incredible? What a poetic justice. You see? Because they already have 55 seats. So guess what? Everybody knows that when Saar's going to put together a coalition, what's going to happen? Right? Everybody's going to want to join because this is it. You see? And there are people from the blue and white that are going to join with Saar because they want to be in the government, not in the opposition. Because in the opposition, you're basically dead. There's nothing there except sitting there. You see, everybody wants power. So wouldn't it be incredibly ironic if Saar can put a coalition together? All he needs is another 6 seats, right? Wouldn't it be incredibly unbelievable, you know? And because there are parts of blue and white that are really right. There's a party called Telem, and Telem is, I think, Yalom. And Moshe Yalon is really right. The reason why he's with blue and white, which is left, is because he hates Netanyahu. So what they may do is just drop blue and white and join with Saar. So then he would have 60. I think they have 5 seats. So he'll get somebody else by offering him a ministership and so on, you know. But then you don't need Lieberman. So here's what's going to happen if that happens: is Lieberman will be out of the coalition. Lieberman will be in the opposition, and his party, with the Russians and all that, will be so incensed by the fact that he's not even in the government that his whole party will disband. Wouldn't that be incredible poetic justice? It's called he outsmarted, he outfoxed himself, you know. But the amazing thing is that God used the very person who hated the Haredim, right, to destroy the Erev Rav that is basically anti-Jewish or, you know, against Judaism. I find that to be a very interesting possibility, really fascinating. So on.
Moshe grown up in the
what? Yeah, it's a classic. Yeah, like Moshe Rabbeinu, who is to overthrow Egypt, actually is raised by Paroi to overthrow him. You see, God does that many times, and so on.
Not debating it, but does Rob know enough about Netanyahu's punishment yet before we get to like some kind of meta analysis of, like, we haven't seen the end of the story.
No, we haven't. This is just beginning.
It's probably going to get worse.
Oh yeah.
Likely going to.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, he's going to have to think about this all day long. How do I protect myself? Means he's got to get maybe new lawyers because these lawyers didn't do a very good job, right? And you know how much money it's going to cost him? He's going to be thinking about this all day because he's looking at a jail sentence. You know what I'm saying? If he gets convicted, he goes to jail. You see what I'm saying? This is serious business. And obviously, they don't care if a prime minister goes to jail. They'd send Olmert to jail. The only difference is Olmert, right, is after he was prime minister. He's a sitting prime minister. You know? So until they put together a government, this man is going to be incredibly humiliated. I don't care what his bravado. Yeah, I'm innocent and it's a witch hunt. Who cares what he says? In the end, he's got to look at everybody and they're going to say, by the way, you know, you've been criminally indicted for 3 crimes. And I think there was a poll, I'm not sure, but I think there was a poll on Friday where it said that 57, if I remember correctly, 57% of the electorate, more than half, said that he's indicted, he should resign. So he's losing the Israeli public. You see? So then who's supporting him? This has to be a source of unbelievable pain and anguish. You see? That's the Midah Keneged Midah. You've created such an enormous amount of pain and anguish to Jews with all these things, with Hamas and Hezbollah, and you did nothing. People died, property was destroyed, fear, everybody's frightened in the south, you know, and you could have done it, like I said, you know. How much anguish was caused because he refused to do his job. I mean, look, in many ways he did a great job. I'm not saying no. But in this area, security, safety, terrible. And the terrible thing about it is he could have taken him out. What's the problem here? It's unbelievable, you know? So if you want to look at it that way, there's a Midah Keneged Midah, anguish for anguish. You see, you want to allow God saying, my people to be destroyed, guess what? I will destroy you. It's a classic measure for measure, and so on, So it's tragic. I feel sorry for the guy, because in many ways he was, many aspects, an outstanding prime minister. There's no question about that. But listen, in the eyes of God, on the scales of justice, he obviously was found wanting, and I'm just thinking this is the reason why, and so on, But in any case, what the main idea to focus on is that this is incredible. You see, there are riots in Iran, and we don't know how far that's going to go. You see, Trump has now given back basically everything to the Jewish people. You see, and the Arab Rav is disappearing. They're collapsing. You see, now we just have to see what happens, and so on, who takes over. Hopefully it'll be Gideon Sa'ar, and there'll be a new kind of approach to the whole concept of, of Judaism. And that will begin the rehabilitation process, which ultimately, of course, winds up in the service of, it's a Messianic process, and so on, Anyway, that's my take. So in many ways it's tragic and so on. But the good news, at least, is that the rehabilitation process, I believe, has begun. Which is amazing when you think about that. That means we are really in the end time. Everybody's got to wake up. We're on the end time.
Do tshuva now while it's worth more.
Do tshuva now while it's a valid currency.
Right.
You wait till after Mashiach comes, there's no tshuva, because you have no free will. It's not valid as currency, you see.
If he's part of Arab Rav,
who is?
Let's say Netanyahu. Can we say that? I mean,
he is.
So then, is it tragic that he is falling? I know the Rav just said
because he's still
tremendous punishments, way more than.
Because like I said, it's terrible. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy, because in many ways he was an outstanding prime minister in certain aspects, but in many ways he was a terrible failure. Like I said, we do not know the value of one Jewish neshama. We don't. And you can't say, we can tolerate a certain amount of deaths of Jews, from Hamas or Hezbollah. Well, as long as that there's no war. What are you talking about? One Jewish life is worth than your whole position, like Rabbi Kotler said to Morgenthau. Do we have an understanding of the life of one Jew? Of course not. It's playing around with fire. That's what he did. Played around with fire. Tragic. Really is, And you should know in many ways, he's a very bright guy, Netanyahu, and he's not anti-religious at all, Not that he did anything, the only reason why he did for the Haredim is because he needed them in the coalition, not because he wanted to do, because there's so many things that he could have done, as you pointed out, the Mitzvah Chinuch and so on, He didn't. Okay. But it's the agony and the anguish that he gave the Jews. I believe that's what comes back to haunt him. What can you say?